to think about all of this. So, with that somewhat mumbled of an opening of a presentation, let's see if we can't start the show. All right. I'm going to assume that everything is popping up nice and beautiful like. So October to September, let's talk about a full timeline for what we should all be thinking about in terms of an admissions process. So we already did a little bit of quicker introductions, but this is my contact information. I personally have a lot of commitment to making sure that anybody, if you have questions about the college admissions process and your admissions counselor is not responding to you, send me an email, give me a phone call, and I will help you out. As I'm not necessarily a first-gen student, but I am someone who a lot of his friends are first-gen students. So I have a lot of, I also come out of college preparatory programs, so I'm an AVID student. I'm actually one of the first set of AVID students that graduated through the state. So if you have questions, if you have concerns, if you have complaints, animal noises, anything to do with the whole college admissions process, please send me an email, send me a text, and we'll talk about it generally, and then we'll turn around and talk about Hamlin if that's what you're still interested in afterwards. Otherwise, my other big warning for this whole presentation is that there's going to be a whole bunch of Hamlin stuff on it, but I'm going to try to keep it as broad as humanly possible so that we can have a nice conversation at the end about all colleges across the board. All right. So with that out of the way, before we can start talking about an effective timeline, though, we need to make sure that we're having a conversation about what it is that you should be thinking about, the questions that you need to be thinking about for yourself personally. And I think those can all be boiled down to 4 questions. So how big, how small, how far away from home, what do you want to do / kind of what are your career goals? Then finally, do you like these people? And for anybody who is not familiar, that is Uncle Iroh. If you haven't been watching Avatar: The Last Airbender, either when it originally aired, it's on Netflix. It's a delightful show. Highly recommended for everybody. All right. So first question, right? How big, how small? All of these are excellent questions that you should, everything that's listed here are all excellent questions to ask of yourself. But I like to talk about this first from the perspective of this is a picture of my best friend, cradle to the grave kind of situation. We've been running around together since we were in kindergarten together. And we couldn't be 2 different types of academic learners. So I always say that how big, how small is best answered by what kind of a learner are you. Michael is one of those human beings who you can hand him a college textbook and he will read through the whole thing, take your test. You don't need to talk to him. He'll just work through it that way. Me, on the other hand, I've always been somebody who I've always needed a professor to kind of to hold my feet to the fire a little bit, to remind me that procrastinating is not going to help you in the long run. And much to my chagrin, they were right, but that's a whole nother story. And so I've always known that I was going to end up going to a smaller school because I knew that if my professor can see what my good work actually looks like, that they will always, and I say this again, always come back and drag me into doing better work. And so if that's starting to sound a little bit familiar for yourself about how it is that you function as a learner, then you kind of know what direction you're going to start pulling yourself in one way or the other. I mean, there are other ways to try to figure it out, but I think that's the most important lesson. Michael, on the other hand, again, he went to a far larger school because he's a laser focused human being, much like the missiles the rockets he makes. So he was going to go to a bigger school. So his school was 40,000. Mine was Hamlin, and I was at 2,000. So start thinking about that for yourself. Next question is where physically, how far away from home are you willing to go / what is kind of around the school as well, right? I have some of my best friends went to California and have never come back. I thought I was going to go to school in Wisconsin, and somehow I ended up 30 minutes away from home. It doesn't matter how far away from home you're ultimately choosing, as long as you are comfortable with it. And if you do go really far away from home, that you start thinking if your plan is to get as far away from your family as humanly possible, that's okay. But you also have to recognize that you're also going to be very far away. And so you might not see your family for 9 months out of the year. And get if that's okay for you, if that works for you, sweet. But if it's not something you've ever thought about, start thinking about it. Also, don't just pick a campus because it's pretty. Start thinking about like what kind of opportunities is the school going to offer you as well, right? So if you wanted to get into chemistry, right, it doesn't make a lot of sense if the only thing around that school for chemistry is the school itself, right? Maybe you want to try doing internships. Maybe you want to do some research projects. It's also important to think about like where can the school send you, right? Where in the wide world can you possibly end up inside of a program? And so start thinking about both what is physically at the school, what is around the school itself, and then where can the school also help you go to explore your future. Third question, right? What kind of programs do they have? A lazy way to ask that question is a lot of admissions counselors will ask you that question is, well, what do you want to study when you go to college? Which, don't get me wrong, pretty standard question, but at the same time, what do you want to do for dinner? That's a way less life threatening situation, a way less life threatening question to ask about what it is that you want to do with potentially the rest of your life. So instead, what I think is better to do is ask questions about like what kind of programs are like what. So you might not know exactly what you want to do, but I'm pretty confident you have like a couple of areas in general that you're like, man, I really like hard sciences. That is, you have now officially like eliminated 365 degrees, right, of possibility. Down to 360. I did math poorly. I've gotten out of the habit of doing math because my wife is a math teacher. So, so you have 360 options all the way around, and so now you've kind of culled it down to a handful, and that is an amazing thing to go into. The other thing is like you're only really going to be in class for about 12 hours a week. So what else are you going to fill your time with? What other things are you interested in? What other things have you always wanted to do but haven't been able to do because high school doesn't is hard and it doesn't like allow you to always have all the time in the world to join every single organization and see what they're about, and like start thinking about the things that you've always wanted to do, and then start asking when you go to visit a school, ask them about those things. Like, I've always wanted to skydive. Does your school have a skydiving team? Does it have some way for me to try skydiving? Stuff like that. And then the last question, and this will go along with a little bit of a story, as we can probably guess. Do you like these people? It's really hard to do to figure that part out, especially hard to do in the time of COVID. But I promise you, it is important to start asking that question because you're going to be there for 4-ish years, right? And if you don't feel like if you go to a small school or if you go to a big school and you don't feel like you can talk to anybody, if it feels like it's the 13th grade, right? It's like everybody already knows each other and somehow you have to like somehow also adapt to the school itself and then also adapt to these, try to like wiggle your way into new friend groups. It's really hard to do that, right? But also these people are going to be there to should be there to help support you, to like challenge you when you're like if you're not being the nicest person, like they should be there to challenge you and hold you accountable for that, but also to like challenge you to become more than what you are, because if you leave college the same way you came in, you have failed. And that college has also failed you, right? So to go along with this is my friend Ingrid. Ingrid and I met on the swim team when I was a young boy. You can trace the growth and then the disappearance of my dreadlocks along with my friendship with Ingrid, quite literally. So this is me during my freshman year. This is me and Ingrid during my sophomore year, and the man that she's eventually going to marry, who is also my friend. This is Ben. This is the two of them at their weddings, and you can just barely see like my dreadlocks are still in play right here. And this is their son Harrison. And now my dreadlocks have completely disappeared. But this is their son Harrison. And me reading terribly to Harrison. He was getting very frustrated with how slow I read out loud, but that's neither here nor there. The point is that these people are going to become like an addition to your family. And if you don't think about it in terms of like again of people who are going to be there for you in these really big meaningful moments in your life, you're going to miss out on a lot. But that's an even longer story for another time. So now that we've had some conversation about what it is that you should be thinking about inside of your head when we're going through this process, we can start talking about a timeline. So Obviously we are in October, but I do think October is a good place to start this. So first things first, when you are looking for colleges, when you're learning about them, I think it's important to start with the easy stuff, which is, I know you all have access to the internet. Go take a look at a college's website. It's a great place to start, especially if you don't know. So start clicking around. If you don't know what you should be reading for, start looking at the pictures. Right. Really into comic books, and so I always like to peruse through pictures inside of every store I look for, just to kind of like get a good feel for what it is that the school is about. Do the people look like they're actually talking to each other? Even when a pictures look posed, you can tell. I think everybody can get a pretty good idea of what a real smile looks like and what a fake one looks like. And then if that still isn't quite enough, there's a laundry list of people that you can talk to about thinking about colleges, right? You can talk to family members, you can talk to guidance counselors, you can talk to teachers, you can talk to friends of family members, right? Or more importantly, if you want to play on hard mode, give your admissions counselor a call out of the blue. I guarantee you will be scared the first time, and then we will make you feel comfortable. That's what our job is, because we want to know stuff about you. We want to know who you are, what gets you out of bed, what's your favorite potato. All right, maybe not every admissions counselor cares about what your favorite potato is, but the point is that we are trying to learn something about you so that we can turn around and effectively tell you that, yeah, you should come to my school, and here are the reasons why. And then once you have made a decision that you kind of like the way the school is talking, come and visit. Even in the time of COVID, there are tons of schools who are open to do college visits at. And even if they're not open for a college visit, you can call in and visit with like students, or you can call and visit with admissions counselors. You can even call into different schools and ask to set up a conversation to have with professors. If you are unsure of what you want to do as a major, that is an incredibly okay way to come into college. The only thing you have to be willing to do after recognizing that you're unsure or you're undecided is start asking people about the what a department looks like. What does a field look like? And professors are giant nerds in very specific topics. They love to talk about the things that they know, right? So let them do that. Call into a school, say, hey, can you set me up an appointment with your legal studies professors? Can you set me up with what are your music professors? I have some really broad questions about this program, and I don't know where to start. So can you tell me? And the worst case scenario is that you walk away with information about how a music program could or should function, and then you go look at another school that does. Again, it's going to be one of the most nerve-wracking things you'll ever do in your life, but it'll get easier every time you do it. Also, since I'm a swimmer by trade, I always encourage people to try the food. Like, seriously, you're going to be there for 4 years. If the food is gross, it's going to be a problem. All right. So since we're still in this kind of like October, November period, right? We got to start talking about the buildup of the application, right? So most schools' application is going to include something along the lines of your transcripts. It's going to include a letter of recommendation. It's going to include, it's going to include an essay, and then it's going to. Some schools are still asking you for ACT and SAT scores. For that, on that note, Hamline is not asking for your ACT scores or your SAT scores anymore. I couldn't be more happy about it, because your ACT and your SAT scores don't tell me anything about how curious you are academically, and to me that matters more than anything else. I need you to be curious about higher education, otherwise this whole thing falls apart. But that's a conversation for a different time. So when we're talking about the application, the smaller the school, the more likely it is that your actual admissions counselor is going to be sitting there and reading through everything that you put in. So for everybody who turns in an application from South High School, I'm it. I'm literally the person that's going to be reading your application. And I realize that just makes all of this incredibly more intimidating. And I promise you it's not, because I believe in you already. My love is unconditional. What I need you to do is ultimately tell me why it is that you want to go to college. What is it like? Tell me about how it is that, like, when you have an 8 a.m. class, and you will, when you have an 8 a.m. class, tell me about why are you going to get out of bed, right? If you wake up at 7:50, you got 10 minutes to get to class. Convince me that you are going to roll out of your bed, throw on your best pair of sweatpants, and by your best pair of sweatpants, I mean the ones that you wore yesterday and like you've really been wearing for the last week, right? And like bolt over to the classroom to get there as quickly as you can, right? I want to know that maybe you don't know what you want to do, but that you know that there's something out there that you do want to do, and that you know that if you go to college, someone will be able to eventually guide you to where you want to go. That's the kind of things that people that admissions counselors are legitimately looking for inside of the essay section. Also, it never hurts to have somebody else like read through your application a second time and like, hey, you misspelled these things. Never a bad idea to have get a second reader or a third reader, or like write it and then read it to your back to yourself. And if it sounds a little funny, try it again. As far as a letter of recommendation goes, I highly recommend you start asking letters of recommendations now instead of like, ooh, I don't know, 2 days before you're trying to turn in your application. A big reason for that is that your teachers are exceptionally busy. My wife is a math teacher right now and is grading assignments that students are turning in right now. And everything is due in about 9 minutes. So be kind to your teachers. Ask early. Then, as always, transcripts are going to be pretty straightforward. We can have a separate conversation about that later. And then we're talking about introduction to ACT and SAT scores. Take those separately, get them attached into your application and send them in. If there's any one big piece of advice I can give about the overall application, use the Common App. I have never met a school like if a school accepts the Common App, that means that they are not allowed to view like their own application any higher than the Common App itself. And I don't know of any schools right now that aren't using the Common App, so please use it. It makes everybody's life easier, including your admissions counselor. And most importantly, at the very end of the Common App, it asks a question about why do you want to go to this specific school, which to me is even probably one of the most important things because it tells me a little bit about what you have learned about my school. And then if you do answer that question, make sure that you don't just copy and paste what somebody wrote on, like what we write on our website. That's a fast way for us to know you don't know anything about the school, and that's a bad sign. I'm sure there'll be more questions about that later, but we got to keep going. So, important dates to keep in mind. Again, this will be a little bit vague. I have to use Hamlin's. Most schools work on a very similar kind of calendar. So, November 1st or October 1st, the FAFSA opened up. That's not like a deadline. So, if you didn't put it on the 1st, like you're screwed. It's like literally it opened up on the 1st. So, the sooner you get the FAFSA in, the easier it will be for a school to turn around and give you your official financial aid award, which, trust me, when we get to it, will help you out a lot. Next thing down is November 1st is early decision. So November 1st, I never recommend doing early decision unless you are like 98% sure about a school or more. Don't get me wrong, some schools are going to offer you more money if you do an early decision, but I think it's really hard. I think it's a little weird to have somebody who is not any older than 22 to be signing a legally binding document that says if you let me in, I will come to your school for at least the very first semester. So unless you're 98% sure or more, don't do early decision, just do early action. Early action can in a lot of places will be just as effective. It gets your application in early. It means that your admissions counselor will be super excited to see your application. Will tear through the whole thing. Still have some time to ruminate on everything you've told us about yourself and who you are and what your favorite potato is. I don't know why I'm stuck on potatoes, but what your favorite potato is again, and we'll still have, and sometimes you'll even still have access to some of those scholarships for early action sometimes early decision. And then after that, we start getting into like regular and rolling decision. So Hamlin has all these things and regular and rolling decision on January 15th. When it comes to those, it's okay if you wait until after your first semester grades are out. So for you to be until before you send those in, it's okay. But I do say that the sooner you start the conversation with us, even if you're not turning in the application right away, if you send us an email and say, hey, I'm really excited about Hamlin, or hey, I'm really excited about Carleton, or hey, I'm really excited about Macalester, right? Tell me about your school. What are you curious about? You are starting the process of getting your foot in the door, and that can be just as effective as getting your application in. If we know you really want to be here, but you just want to like ruminate on it, you just want to make sure that you can get your grades look as sharp as they possibly can before sending in your application. All right. So next, we're in January and February. So college is expensive. Let's not mince words on that. It is expensive, but it doesn't have to be expensive. Question mark. I'll make sure I come back to that. So, when it
Corbin,
yes.
I just want to pause here. We had a question earlier, but I think we can answer that one at the end. We had a question if you could explain the difference between early decision, early action, regular decision, and rolling admissions or rolling decision. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'll go a little bit more into detail. So early decision, early decision. Let me go. Actually, just go back here. There we go. So early decision, basically, you say that this is 100% the school that you want to go to. No questions asked. If you let me in, I will turn down all of my other offers at other schools. You can only do that once, and if you double dip, schools will be very upset. Underneath that is early action. A lot of time that just means that you're getting your application in before the majority of them will show up. So early action for most schools is usually December 1st, and then for everybody else, it's usually like their regular decision is sometime in January. So it just means that like I, as your admissions counselor, will have more time to sit on your application and kind of read it. Maybe I'll even give you a call. Like when usually you'll have people who are doing the writing your letters of recommendation, one or two different people normally. I might actually have time to turn around and call them and ask them more questions about who you are. So especially if you have concerns about where your grades might be. So if you're coming in at like a 2.9 and you're worried that might not be quite strong enough to get into Hamlin, that's a great place for both your recommender to make suggestions to me, but it also allows me to turn around and ask your recommender some additional questions. So maybe like you had a really rough time with chemistry. Chemistry was not my favorite, so you want to but if you get the person who taught your chemistry class to write your letter of recommendation, that's an awesome way for me to be able to go, it was not their best subject, but this teacher is still willing to put their good name on the line for them. Regular and rolling decision work like this. So regular decision just means that's when the bulk of students are going to turn around and send in their applications. So if to use my own territory, so I have a lot of Minneapolis and surrounding suburbs as my area, as my territory. I have roughly about 1,000 to about 1,200 applications that will come flying in immediately on January 15th. So that just means I'm crushing through a lot of applications all at the same as quickly as I possibly can. So it just means that I don't have I'm still going to read every application I get, but I also have to read it a little bit faster. So it's a little bit harder for me to easily distinguish between different kinds of applications and different people, because sometimes you guys end up writing similar essays. That's okay, but it does become a little bit more difficult to distinguish across when I'm reading 20 different applications in an hour. So that's why I really enjoy early action, because it's very selfish of me as an admissions counselor, but I like to have more time to sit around and enjoy you showing me who you are and what you're about. And then rolling decision basically runs from like that January 15th-ish date all the way through about May 1st. So what that really means is you can keep applying. You can hold off and wait till you're done with your first semester grades. You could hold off until your ACT scores roll in. You're welcome to apply anytime. My personal piece of advice with that is if you wait too long to turn in your application, there's a very good chance you will miss the opportunities to do internal and departmental scholarships and talent-based scholarships for a lot of universities, since those kind of pop up in that January, February-ish period, because they want to make sure that they tell people what the result is in March. I think that covered everything.
Okay, we have one more question, and it's, do most colleges have early action now?
A lot of schools, I'd say most, if not all schools, have early action as an option on the early action as an option on the table. I don't can't think of a single school that goes early decision only, early decision and regular decision with no early action option.
Awesome. Thank you.
Cool. All right. So January, February, college doesn't have to be expensive. I know you guys are going to have a longer presentation about FAFSA coming up soon. So about FAFSA, financial aid, and all the fun jazz. So I'm going to kind of burn through this pretty quickly. But when it comes to making college less expensive, schools are going to have a whole bunch of like merit scholarships that frequently they're just going to plop on your desk the moment you turn in your application, right? Because that's going to connect. That's where your GPA, your class rank, and your test scores usually come together and help them spit out a number for your merit-based scores. But if you finish out that FAFSA we were talking about a couple slides ago, that means they can also turn around and start giving you financial aid awards. And so you can get even closer to figuring out what the end cost is going to be for you. But while you're waiting for all of that stuff to eventually arrive, start filling out scholarships. Look literally everywhere. If you don't want to have to pay, or you know that you don't have a lot of funds to be able to pay for college, that is perfectly okay. You are coming in with a lot of other people who are going to be looking in the same position though. And so you have to make sure you are turning over every single rock you can possibly find. If you have a job, if your parents have a job, if your grandparents have a job, see if their employers offer scholarships for employees, right? Places of worship are another excellent place to turn around and look for scholarships. Is early actually non-binding? Early action is non-binding. Early decision is very binding. Again, legal documents, real scary. Do not recommend doing that unless you know. So did I miss anything? Sales guidance? Guidance offices and schools are littered with scholarship opportunities. Go in there, take a peek, and see what they have going on. After that, though, I highly recommend that you start looking, you continue to look even beyond that, right? Go use websites, right? There's fastweb.com and College Greenlight are two excellent options for for big aggregators of like different types of scholarships that will usually pertain to your particular interest, because they're going to ask you a lot of detailed questions like that. And then even beyond that, I forgot I lost my train of thought there for a second. My apologies. But even beyond that, right? You can even look inside of schools and see what kind of departmental and talent-based scholarships they are offering, because that will all help drag the cost of college from being like way too high to being something far more reasonable to sometimes being as low as $20. I have a student right now who goes to Hamline who she pays $20 for the year to go to Hamline. And if you want that to be you, make sure that you are applying for scholarships early, often, and more importantly, make sure that you look at both the really big ones, the ones that say $10,000 off, and the ones that are really small and say that are only like $500. Because you stack enough $500 scholarships on top of each other, it becomes $10,000. I know that personally because that's all I did for basically between spring and starting in the summer, starting in the fall of my freshman year, which is every weekend I would go find a scholarship and fill it out. That's just that easy. You just have to be diligent about it. All right, we got to keep this moving. So March and May, now we're starting to get into decision time. So in March and May, you're going to want to start transitioning over to like visiting and trying to compare schools again, right? So go back, visit again, try the food again, talk to professors, see, and like you're gonna be a completely different person because it's going to be a long way. It's always a long winter, right? So you're gonna be a completely different person from fall you, spring you is going to be excited about this, and maybe even if we can start like going around maskless again in the spring, that would be such a lovely time, wouldn't it? So you're going to be a completely different person. You'll be excited to try this again, and so it'll be important to go back, take a look at the schools, see if some of that shine has rubbed off, or if it's just as cool as it was the first time that you saw it, right? You'll probably have new questions about different programs. So see what kind of value you can get out of it. Go back and try some, like, go to some of the events. Schools are always throwing events in the spring, so see if you can snag some free tickets for a game or for a show if it's something you have an interest in some capacity. As always, as I said before, you got to keep looking for scholarships. Don't quit just because, like for a lot of schools, the scholarship deadline will show up in late January, late January, early February, so that because the school wants to make sure that it can give you a decision by the time you're coming into March. And the reason why they want to make sure that they can give you a decision in March is because they also know that that's the time where people are going to start looking at comparative awards and saying, all right, well, this school is going to give me this much money. This school is going to give me this much money. This is just not enough, right? So the school's out, right? And so if they can slip a scholarship right in at the right time for you, like just like that, it can change your mind, right? And while you're going through that process, and if you look at a school and like it's just not quite as shiny, or you know that like there's no way you're going to be able to afford the school itself, and you've been talking to the admissions counselor, which I always recommend, keep talking to the admissions counselor. I can promise you, the more we know about you, the more we can get you connected to resources, to options available to you, right? If you've done all these things and you finally go, you know what, that school just isn't for me, right? Send us a breakup text. We are adults. We have been broken up with before. It's okay. We'll be able to emotionally recover from that, but you have to tell us that you are no longer interested. Otherwise, we will keep sending you emails, we'll keep calling you, and you'll keep getting pamphlets. And so if you'd like to maybe cut down any or all of the above, just let us know you're not interested anymore, and you will stop getting those emails. All right. So now we're in May, the scariest month of all, because on the very first of the month, you have to make an official decision about where it is that you want to go. First things first is relax, breathe, and remember those first 4 questions that I asked you before, right? How big, how small? Where is the school? Like, where is it physically located and what is around it? What kind of programs are you looking for? And then finally, do you like the people? As you were going through it, if you're stuck between like 4 or 5 schools, keep asking yourself those 4 questions. And if a school is not matching up with one of those or all of them, then you know pretty quickly you can move that school out. But finally, you just kind of at some point in time, you just kind of have to take a leap of faith and go, I feel that this is the right call. Make the decision, pay in the deposit. One thing that I missed from the last slide, unfortunately, because I'm trying to make sure we keep us on time, is you want to make sure that that if you know that you're considering that you might need a deposit waiver, that you start talking to your admissions counselor about it. A lot of schools have to actually deposit for a school, you usually need something between $100 to about $400. And if you know that you're not going to be able to produce something between $100 to $500, or for $100 to about $400, then you can turn around and like ask the school to waive your deposit fee. It's very easy to do, but there is a big catch in it, which is that if you call an admissions office and say that you are looking to get a deposit waiver, as far as they are concerned, you are looking to deposit at that school, and they will treat you as such, which means that technically you should also turn around and start calling other schools and breaking up with them as you go through it, right? So make the decision, deposit where you'd like, and then take a breath, take a breather, rest up, and then remember that usually between the 2nd and 3rd week of May, your AP tests are coming up. So knock those out of the park. I believe in you. You're going to do great. And then, as always, just keep talking to your admissions counselor. Again, we're here as a resource for you. So please use us for what we're there for. All right. And then the final chunk of this presentation, which I'll rip through, June through September. I'm sure everybody thought that they were going to take the summer off. I always have kids who are just choose to be gone in the month of June. And I'm going to tell you right now, don't do that. Reason for it is a lot of time between June and August, we are doing orientation. We are registering for classes. We're trying to encourage you to come back and to like look at the school again to get a good feel for it. When you graduate from high school, make sure that you are coming back and that you send us your transcripts, that you send us your AP scores, your IB scores, your CIS, your PSEO, because we need that stuff to turn around and confirm to confirm what kind of credits you're going to get. And we really need your transcripts from your high school, because if you don't turn those in, technically we can't give you any of the scholarships or any of the state grants because we don't have any proof that you graduated high school. So that's a big one. Make sure you get that in. It's super easy to do though. Since you are, for a lot of you, your high school email is going to stop working. So update us with your personal email. And as a side note, maybe like build a professional sounding email. That's just a quick, small suggestion. It will make your life a lot easier down the road as well when you're applying for jobs. If you're living on campus, confirm your housing, get your financial aid award kind of finished out and perfected so you can have so that when if they ask any additional questions, you got it ready to go. Usually you aren't required to start setting up a lot of the billing information until August, but nobody likes a surprise bill. So, call into the financial aid office over the summer. Just to try to figure out, like, all right, so what do I need to do? What else do I need to set up to make this work, to make this happen for me? And then that's it. We're just back to pictures of me and questions you guys can answer. I know that there was one other one, and I missed it. So my apologies. And I'll slide back in here. Let's see. So